Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernst Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. February is right around the corner, and college basketball is starting to get more and more important as we get closer and closer to March Madness and the NCAA tournament. And we've got a big rivalry game on deck in college basketball on Wednesday night. A rivalry that has gained significance in the past few years because both of these teams have gotten a lot better, and it's now one of the most underrated rivalries in college basketball. We know of the UNCs and the Dukes and the Indiana Purdues, but we've got Auburn traveling on the road to the Alabama Crimson Tide, and Bruce Pearl and Nate Oats, both of these coaches have made this rivalry game so much better because these two teams are actually good in college basketball right now. We know that Auburn has had a history in the past. Charles Barkley played for them. Alabama's had their moments throughout history as well, but there's really never been a point where this rivalry has had as many eyeballs on it and as many people, especially in the state of Alabama, that care about this game. Both of these are football schools. We know how much the Iron Bowl matters, but Auburn and Alabama playing in basketball the last few years has been a much better sight to behold. Both of these teams are selling out their stadiums, especially for this game, and it should be a great atmosphere in Tuscaloosa when Alabama, being unranked and an underdog in most people's eyes against the Auburn Tigers, the last team in the SEC that has not lost a game, and they're ranked number 8 in the country and playing fantastic basketball. Now, as you can see, the FBI predictor does give Alabama the advantage. They're giving them that home crowd. Alabama has a tough atmosphere, and they definitely are going to have a really good chance to win. But looking at what Auburn has done, because they are the talk of the SEC right now, no one was expecting Auburn to be ranked in the top 10 at any point this season, and I don't think anybody thought Bruce Pearl was going to have the Auburn Tigers at the top of the SEC like they currently are at 5-0 in the conference. They're the only undefeated team left. It's amazing how well Auburn's done. They started out with a loss to Baylor in the first game of the regular season. That wasn't a big deal because Baylor's really good. Then they strung off some wins in a row until they lost to Appalachian State on the road. And granted, it was on the road, but that was a bad loss for Auburn. And people were like, oh, I don't think Auburn's that good. They're probably going to be a middle-of-the-pack SEC team, maybe even toward the bottom. But then after they blew out Indiana in the non-conference, they got it together. They beat USC, and once they entered SEC play, Auburn has been rolling, rattling off all these wins in a row, capped off with a blowout win over the Ole Miss Rebels. And Chris Beard's squad is solid. They've been ranked in the top 25 last couple weeks, but Auburn just blew the doors off of them. It was at home, but that's setting up the Tigers very well for this matchup with their rivals in the Alabama Crimson Tide on the road. Now, looking at the roster for Auburn, because Bruce Pearl has done a really good job bringing in players to the Auburn Tigers and getting some of the better talent in college basketball to play for a school that normally has been known as a football school and has struggled in college basketball for a while. But Bruce Pearl, he's been the head coach for Auburn for a while, and he has increased the talent pool for the Tigers. Johni Broome has been a great transfer addition for the last 2 years. He's the leading scorer for the Tigers at 15 points per game and 8 rebounds. He is one of the best front court players in the SEC, and he teams up with Jalen Williams in the front court, who averages 12 points per game. He's having a solid year. And then you have a Den Holloway at 10 points per game, Chad Baker, Mazzara at 9 points per game, Katie Johnson at 7 points per game, Trey Donaldson, Denver Jones both average 7 points, Dylan Cardwell averages 6 points, and it goes on and on. You see that this team is balanced, and Johni Broome plays the most minutes per game for Auburn at 23 minutes per game. The rest of the team plays fewer minutes than he does on average, and a lot of these guys only play around 17 to 18 minutes per game. This team reminds me of the Florida State team back in 2019 and 2020 with Leonard Hamilton, where he was able to go 10 deep and so many different guys would play, and they made an impact on the game. No one was really the star. Devin Vassell ended up being the best player off that team in the NBA, but there were other guys on that team that contributed heavily, and they were a very balanced squad, and it was tough to slow them down and tire them because so many guys could come in that were fresh off the bench. And this Auburn team, that's why they're so good, because somehow, some way, Bruce Pearl was able to bring in enough players through the portal, get enough returning players on this team that all are contributing, and they are okay with not playing too many minutes per game. But Alabama, not to be outdone, they've had an up and down year. They started the season out ranked. Nate Oats, a really good coach for the Crimson Tide, have made him a better program after the Avery Johnson era, and they started out with some wins over some bad teams, but then they lost to Ohio State, which That loss isn't great because Ohio State's kind of struggling right now in the Big Ten, but still not a terrible loss. They beat Oregon, then they lost to Clemson, which Clemson's having a pretty good year, even though they slipped up a little bit lately. Losing to Purdue's not a problem. Purdue's great, and we know Purdue is a fantastic team in the non-conference. We don't know if Purdue's going to advance far in the NCAA tournament, but still, it's not a bad loss for Alabama. Then they lost to Creighton and Arizona, so neither of those losses are bad either, and they were competitive in all three games. But then Alabama's gotten it together, and they beat Mississippi State, and they beat Missouri. But in their last time out, they lost to Tennessee on the road. That isn't a bad loss either because Tennessee's a really good team, but Alabama still lost that game by 20. But they are 4-1 in the SEC, and they are on an upward trajectory. Alabama's probably looking better now than they were a few weeks ago before they've had some of these better performances lately. But now they're going to be facing the Auburn Tigers at home. And even though the FBI predictor again's on their side, they're going to have to get a lot out of their star players if they're going to have a shot to beat Auburn, who is rolling right now and probably the hottest team in college basketball as of this time. Mark Sears and Aaron Estrada lead a great backcourt for Alabama. Both of these guys were transfers. Nate Oats and Bruce Pearl utilized the portal very well. But the two leading scorers for Auburn are the front court players. The two leading scorers for Alabama are in the backcourt. So it's going to be interesting to see if the forwards for Auburn or the guards for Alabama end up winning out in this game, because Auburn has some good guards too, but Alabama's guards definitely are the main attraction, whereas for Auburn it is the forwards. Grant Nelson is the best forward for Alabama. He's the transfer from North Dakota State. He's having a good year, and he has been stepping up more lately, but I do believe that Alabama fans probably expected a bit more from Grant Nelson. Maybe they thought he'd average more around 15 points per game, but he's still playing well. Got to give him some credit, though, because this is his first season in the SEC. Johni Broome, it's his second season playing for Auburn, and he's doing better this year than he did last year, so maybe it's just going to take Grant Nelson some more time to get used to playing at a higher level, but he is playing well. Rylan Griffin's averaging 10 points per game. Latrell Wright's averaging 7 points per game. He was a transfer. Sam Walters is averaging 6 points. Nick Pringle's averaging 5 points. Jaron Stevenson's averaging 5 points. And Muhammad Wade is averaging 5 points as well. So Alabama's a very deep team, but as you can tell, they do lean more heavily on their starters than Auburn does, with Mark Sears playing 30 minutes per game, Aaron Estrada playing 28 minutes per game, Grant Nelson playing 26 minutes per game. Nobody for Auburn plays more than 23 minutes per game. So we'll have to see whether Auburn can tire out Alabama toward the end of the game with some of their players having to play more. And it's going to be interesting to see if Auburn's backcourt can give Alabama's guards fits, because Auburn has been doing a pretty good job on defense more often lately, whereas earlier in the year they were giving up more points. So it's going to be really interesting. Alabama's home environment is definitely going to help out, and we know Alabama has the advantage in the series lately because they won both games last year against the Auburn Tigers. They did lose to Auburn both times in 2022, but we know the Brandon Miller team last year was really good. They fell earlier in the NCAA tournament than a lot of Bama fans were hoping for, but they still had a really good year, and they swept their rivals. And plus, they lead the series over Auburn 101-67. So a lot of things are definitely in the favor of Alabama with the home crowd and the fact that they really do need a win. They are more desperate for a win than the Auburn Tigers, although it's not like they're in any danger of missing the NCAA tournament as of this time. But who do I think is going to win this game? I'm going to predict Auburn to knock off Alabama 80-77. I was tempted to take the Crimson Tide. They've got a great home environment now that Nate Oats is the head coach. He's got a talented backcourt, and I think that they are going to play very well in this game, and Grant Nelson will have an impact in the front court, but I do believe that Jalen Williams and Johni Broome and their experience in the SEC being more than Grant Nelson, they're going to give him some fits. I think Auburn is going to have more of the advantage in the front court than Alabama is going to have, and I do believe that Auburn's depth and the fact that they have good enough guards that can get to Alabama's guards on defense maybe cause them to make some mistakes, especially when they're tired toward the end of the game, and just overall the depth that Auburn has being more than Alabama's. I believe that Auburn and Bruce Pearl's team, who are riding high right now, undefeated in the SEC, ranked top 10 in the country, it's a prime opportunity for an upset from Alabama, but I do believe that Auburn will knock off Nate Oats' squad 80-77 on the road in this improving rivalry game in college basketball. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think that Auburn will go on the road and stay undefeated in the SEC and knock off the rival Alabama in Tuscaloosa, or whether you believe that Nate Oats' squad can knock off their rival in the Auburn Tigers and get their biggest win of the season in college basketball so far. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.